In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I have been turning over in my mind ever since. That is the first sentence of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It is considered by many people to be the great American novel. Is it? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another bibliophile reads. My name is Greg, and on April 10th, 2025, it will be the 100th publication anniversary of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I will be joining a reading group with Sherri at Books and Radio Plays and Ellen at Big Hard Books and Classics to read this classic American novel. It is probably the fourth time I've read this book. I first encountered it as a sophomore at the University of Maryland in one of those surveys of American literature post 1860, some sort of class title like that. And it was a good introduction to this book. Most Americans, either in high school or at university, at some point in their lives, are going to read The Great Gatsby. It is a short, relatively easy book to read, but it's packed with a lot of information that professors and teachers love to talk about. And it is a good book to discuss. But why is it such a popular book? When it was first published, it flopped. F. Scott Fitzgerald was mighty famous in his day. I was listening to a lecture last month, and the lecturer described him as the Tom Cruise of the 1925s, because film was just coming out, radio was out, but novelists were the big thing. If you were an important man, you were a novelist back then. But this book flopped, and F. Scott Fitzgerald never really got over the flop of The Great Gatsby. He thought it would solidify his fame forever, and he died in his 40s in relative poverty. But what happened to The Great Gatsby? During World War II, there were lots of servicemen overseas. A lot of them were stationed in a relatively boring situation, and people decided that servicemen needed books to read. And someone, no one knows who, decided to republish The Great Gatsby in an armed services edition and to distribute it to all these soldiers out in Europe, not doing a whole hell of a lot. And that started the resurgence of The Great Gatsby. Later, when all these soldiers were coming home and studying under the GI Bill, college professors had their classrooms filled with new students, and they needed to teach some literature. And lo and behold, The Great Gatsby was there. Short, easy, powerful, influential. And that's what kicked off The Great Gatsby, according to this lecturer. Now, I am going to be rereading it again, starting on April 10th. And Sherri has created a tag about The Great Gatsby, and I am going to do this tag. There are 5 prompts. Prompt number 1. Do you like parties? Name a book with a big or small party in it. As for me, liking parties, I have 3 answers. No, hell no, and bloody hell no. All those fit, but usually I go for the bloody hell no. I do not like attending parties. I'm going to cheat just a little bit. I am not going to name a book with a party in it. I am going to name the greatest party in all of English literature, in my humble opinion. And that is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe, originally published in 1842. And that is The Mask of the Red Death, where there is a kingdom, not really specified, and there's this plague called the Red Death going around. So the king decides to have this mighty soiree, and everyone's dressed to their finest with masks. Unfortunately, there is an uninvited guest. Such a great short story, and it really sums up the way I would feel after a party. Prompt number 2. What would you do to get the love of your life back? Name a book where a lost love is the center of the story. Not a romance. That is too easy. Yeah, I kind of agree. Romance books would be too easy for this plot. Now, I'm going to go out on the limb just a little bit again, and I'm going to name the horror novel The Fisherman by John Langan. This is a horror story about grief and loss. It is narrated by an elderly, or to say, a middle-aged gentleman who lost his wife early on, and he discovered fishing as a source of solace. In his workplace, he has a younger colleague whose wife and child died in a tragic car accident. So this elderly or older man takes in his younger colleague and teaches him fishing to ease the pain of grief. Unfortunately, this younger man learns of a story of how maybe, just maybe, you can get your lost love back again. Now, this is a horror novel, so you can imagine where it is going to go. And yes, it gets rather gruesome and horrifying. But it brings back to the first part of this question. What would you do to get your love of your life back? Well, in this case, it's death, so there is no getting it back. For Great Gatsby, it's just sort of a breakup of sorts. But you can't change the past. Read chapter 6 again of The Great Gatsby, because there is an important line in there where Gatsby says, you can, where Nick says, you can't get the past back. And of course, Gatsby says, yes, you can. And the problem is, Nick is the correct one in that incident. Prompt number 3. Nick was a character in the story and the narrator. He really puts you into the picture. Who is your favorite narrator? Well, my favorite narrator is Harry Flashman from the Flashman series by George MacDonald Fraser. He was a Victorian soldier, supposedly a gentleman, although no, he was not a gentleman. He was a rogue, he was a scamp, he was a cheat, and he was dishonorable to the core, and a womanizer of great prowess. And I absolutely love the tone of his voice in these series of books. You will have to put up with his bigotry. You will have to put up with him throwing women off the back of a speeding troika to wolves to save his own life. But what a magnificent character. And just to give you a little bit of the tone in these books, let me give you the first sentence of the second book. If I had been the hero everyone thought I was, or even a half-decent soldier, Lee would have won the Battle of Gettysburg and probably captured Washington. Because this is a series of historical novels, and Flashman tends to appear in many of history's important events. albeit unknown to real history. Please check out this series, but you will have to put up with Harry Flashman, a great narrator and a great scamp. Prompt number 4. What is some advice given to you in your younger and more vulnerable years that you've been turning over in your mind ever since? When I was a sophomore in college, maybe a freshman, my father gave me some advice. He says, get a job working with your hands. Because he was an immigrant from France and he had a working man's job. He was actually a cameraman, which was a highly technical working man's job, but he felt that working men worked with their hands. I don't like working with my hands, so I consider that advice total bollocks. And I never really did get a job working with my hands, and I turned out okay in the end. So it's okay to ignore the advice of your father. Prompt number 5. Tom Buchanan is not a good man, but it is done in a very subtle manner. Name a book that the character is not obviously bad, but as you get to know him, he is very, very bad. I am going to go with O'Brien from 1984 by George Orwell. This may be a bit of a spoiler if you have not read 1984, but Winston Smith, the main character of the novel, finds hope and salvation in a man called O'Brien. He is going to help him bring down Big Brother. But O'Brien is the head, or one of the heads, of the dastardly evil Thought Police. And it is devastating to learn that a man that you thought you trusted is, in fact, total, corrupt, evil. There is no limits to what O'Brien will do to Winston Smith to make him love Big Brother. And that is perhaps one of the greatest evils in all English literature. Thank you so much for watching, and keep on reading.